أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. It's a small enough crowd that I could take salams one by one, inshallah, if you wanted to. I always appreciate Abu Mujahid. He's very ambitious, and he said, if you were to come to speak to the youth, in between you'll say salams to Al-Huda families, then you'll go to Unity Center. So this is the salam, inshallah. I'm always happy to be back in this area, and I spent some time with the youth, about an hour before I came here upstairs, and mashallah, I'm always happy that a new generation is coming through this community, because we have very fond memories of the families and the children who came through here, especially, and I know I'll leave out others, but the Haidar family, mashallah, tabarakallah, and the Jindli family, and Asbahi and others, whose children, mashallah, have been a part of our lives growing up, and are a reflection of, inshallah, the hard work that you've all done, and others, inshallah, have also done. What I intend to do, and hopefully we can have a conversation, as I said, that we're a small enough number, and this is from the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to talk a little bit about what we've been dealing with in the US, and focusing on this topic of the integration of Muslim children and families. So this was all planned. Yeah, when I said children, they're supposed to run in, but only one came in. I don't know where the others were. So somebody may say, well, why are we discussing integration? Why is that an important topic now? So I want to say three things about that, and then inshallah we can have a conversation. For me, this is the century of Islam. So if that is news to you, then we should talk, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in many ways sent us signals to say that this 21st century is going to be the century, inshallah ta'ala, in which Islam, in many ways, and especially in the West, will be revived. And one of the main things that we want to talk about is the fact that it may have taken a tragedy such as September 11th to make Islam, the word Muslim, Muhammad, Islam, Quran, Sharia, Jihad, all become a very common part of the American mindset. And we Muslims are now having to talk about it, talk about our religion almost every day. Every day. I was growing up in Cleveland, as you may know from before, in the 80s. So all throughout the 1980s, I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, and I went to college in Cleveland. And nobody asked you if you were Muslim. I don't remember growing up somebody saying, what do you believe in? They did ask you where you are from, because this was the trend. Immigration was increasing. More people were coming in from all parts of Asia, South Asia, Africa, Europe, South America, and so everybody wanted to know where you're from. Now, if your children are in public school or Islamic school, or even in society, people are likely to ask them not where you're from, but what do you believe in? What do you believe in? What do you stand for? Because they've been taught that there are these group of people that have come who are Muslims, and we have to be worried about what they believe in, because what they believe in leads to X, Y, and Z. So that's why we're talking about integration, number one. That I think it is a century of Islam, and I will give you many signs, not the least to mention, of the tragedies that are unfolding. But with each tragedy, Allah is bringing more people to Islam. More people to Islam, whether it's the Arab Spring, or this big tragedy in Syria now, and mashallah, more masajids are filled. Just talking to Imam Shadi about this, and more people are trying to come back to Islam. And even though we see death, even though we see people losing their life, their home, their property, we see more people believing. And this is a way, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause goodness, inshallah, to come for all of us. And of course, we make dua for all of the families and in Syria and around the world, but especially there. Number two, why we're talking about integration is, if you look at the numbers, the Muslim population in the US is increasing for at least 3 reasons. Number one, because of natural births. When I was growing up in the 80s, we always heard that the Muslim population is 5 to 7 million. 5 to 7 million. Now if you ask them, they say maybe 6 to 8 million. This is like 30 years. In that 30 years, I got married. I had 3 kids, so at least it should be 6 million and 3 children. So we don't even know how many we have. But we know because of births, natural births, the number is increasing. Number two, even when we're sitting here today, some new immigrant family is landing at Detroit Airport. They may have gone through New York, through Washington, connected somewhere, but they're now here as refugee or as immigrant. So even as we're discussing integration, we can't say, well, we've been here for 30, 40 years, why are you talking about integration? We know this. Even as we're sitting here, we make a kind of policy for Huda, a new family comes in. And they say, why do you do this? Why do you do this? So each day is a new, a new experience for us. And number three, the number of converts, especially after September 11th, subhanAllah, we have stories of people who became Muslim in the face of the worst things being said about Islam, about the Quran, about the Prophet ﷺ, about Sharia. Even then they became Muslim. So we have to talk about this because now natural births, more people, more Muslims. Because of immigration, more Muslims. Conversion, more Muslims. So in any case, there are more Muslims. On top of that, the number of attacks against Islam are increasing. So about 5 years ago, the focus was entirely on just say Islam is violent. Keep saying that and hopefully people will believe it and then they will say, I don't want to talk about Islam. It didn't work. It didn't work. More people wanted to know about Islam. Then they moved to the Prophet ﷺ. They said, talk about how he married Aisha radiallahu anha and she was so young and so he must have had some problems. It didn't work. Because people saw so much more about the Prophet's life. This is one part, one aspect of his marriage is one aspect. He had many other aspects of his life. Everything about his akhlaq, his character, everything, they saw that. Then they moved their attention last summer to the Quran. So why don't we just burn the book? Maybe that will make it, everybody will stop talking about it. More people bought the Quran when they tried to burn it, and more people became interested. Well, let's see what this book is about. Now last summer and this summer, it's about Sharia. That we somehow, the Muslims, they want the Americans to be convinced that we are trying to make American law changed into Sharia law. But what they don't know, we can barely have elections in our masjid. If they only knew that we can barely have elections and good democracy in our own masjid, in our family sometimes, between husband and wife, trying to make a Sharia out of the US. I'm not trying to be funny, but it makes you think twice. And even if they say we are 6 million, and there's 300 million people, you'll need each 6 million, each Muslim to have at least 100,000 malaika to make 300 million votes to change anything. So I don't know what they're talking about. But that's their new attack is on Sharia. And our children, that's why I talked to them for almost an hour. I want them to know that this is everything they should look out for, because next summer could be a new topic. Something else about Islam. But if they know their religion, nobody can shake them. Nobody can shake their faith. Nobody can shake their belief system. So that's why we're talking about this. And finally, why we're talking about this is because I have a lot of hope. We don't travel, we don't talk, we don't go to convention, if we didn't have any hope. I have hope that every time there is some kind of ibtila on the Muslim community, whether here or overseas, some goodness comes from it, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's always going to happen. This is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we do that. Now, what are the 3 main points about integration? First is that your children and my children have to know that Islam didn't come here yesterday. It didn't come here when your family came. It didn't come here 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 50 years ago. It came here and has been here. They have documentation to show this for at least 700 years. 700 years. Because the first slaves that came to America, among them were people from West Africa. Some of them were actually huffaz of the Quran. Some of them knew Islam and could teach it, the Quran and could teach it. Others knew about the life of the Prophet ﷺ. How do we know some of these things? One of them One of them became freed as a slave. You know, you saw the movie about him. The nobility of Abdul Rahman is known from West Africa. When they traced his lineage, they find that people of that area were not only knew Islam but practiced it, but this was part of their identity. A part of their identity. So now people have done research, and if I wish I had my PowerPoint and things. But they have, for example, you know, the slaves used to live outside in another home. They didn't live with the master. In the outside home where they lived, some of the wood that's been preserved, they had carvings in the wood of Arabic of the Quran. So they said, even if you force me to become Christian, I'm going to keep whatever I have in my mind and I'm going to write it and share it with people. Others had to change their names. But when they died, they had the burial and they had the gravestone. The Christians, they used the gravestone. They actually imprinted, they found it in North Carolina, examples. In the gravestone, if it's like this, you see a hand, the right hand. And you see that the fingers are bent like this and only this is like this. So these were the descendants of the Muslims showing, you may have forced me to believe in Christianity, but in my death, I wanted everyone to know that the Shahada was always in my heart. Always in my heart. Then they did more research, and they found when President Roosevelt, during the Great Depression, they needed employment. They needed people to have jobs, so they were making bridges, new roads, everything. Some of them, they said, go to the South, especially the South, and record history. Record the history of people there. Some of them came back saying, we're finding people, especially in Georgia and Mississippi, where most of the slaves were. Some of them are saying to us things like, we had a great-grandmother who didn't eat pork. We don't know why. We had a great-grandfather or grandfather who used to always do this around certain times of the day. And he wants to always face towards the east. We found others, they're doing what we would call the closest is adhkar, like the tasbih. But we don't know what they were doing. SubhanAllah. This is 1930s when they found this evidence. And this is 7 centuries of Islam in America means that our children, if we keep repeating to them, they will never let somebody say to them, go back to where you came from. Because they will say this is as much my land as it is your land or anybody else's land. So we have to be aware of this. We have to share that with them. But what did happen, and this is true, that all that time they were here, but they were just present, just available. Only in the 1940s and 50s, mostly from what is now Lebanon, Syria and Jordan, some of the people who came, they made Islamic associations. One of them is called the Federation of Islamic Associations, FIA. Many of those people went to places like Iowa, and they made a masjid in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It's known as the Mother Mosque. The Mother Mosque actually was destroyed in a flood about 2-3 years ago and needed much renovation. Do you know the people who went there to help them? They found, some of them said, we are the grandchildren of the people who built this masjid, but we moved away from Islam. We moved away from Islam. We weren't practicing Islam. It wasn't like, it was just not a deep part of our identity. That's almost 70 years ago. 1965, the immigration law changes and more Muslims come in because of the changes in the laws from Asia, Africa, and even Europe. So the problem becomes, is that you and I only tell our children of the recent history. We tell them about immigrants and how we came. But the African Americans who were here, who were Muslims, where I grew up in Cleveland, we have a masjid now. We celebrated in last September, 75th anniversary. Do you know any masjid who celebrated 75th anniversary? No, we don't know of any. Among the immigrant, the muhajir masajid, we don't know. The person who formed the masjid, his name is Hajj Wali Akram, African American, born in Texas, moved to St. Louis, moved across the US and came as a Sunni Muslim. So 75 years of a masjid that has Sunni Islam. Imagine, as an African American, he wasn't in the nation of Islam. Now what was important about him is that he had a 10-year plan for his community. That our community, because they were black people, they couldn't print anything. They couldn't go to say to somebody who paid to print and say, we don't print for you. He had his own printing press for his community. Before internet, his own printing press. There are pictures of him teaching Arabic, because he said our community will know Arabic. They're all black Muslims, African Americans. They have to have their own printing press to know their own, to know Arabic, and they had a plan for self-sufficiency, which means we'll be able to rely only on ourselves, our own businesses, take care of our community. Now, I went last year, they asked me to be the khatib for the 75th anniversary. When I met his brothers and sisters for their family reunion, 200 people come. So from one man, 75 years ago, now 200 people, and his grandson is becoming a scholar from Medina, African American. Young man, subhanAllah, 24, 25, and I was amazed that this could happen. So our children need to know this, that this is a part of their American history. So when they talk about integration, it's not just we are Arabs or Indo-Pakistani, something we came to America. No, there's all of this history. Number two, that I was talking to Imam Shadi and I asked him if he looked in my lecture notes, because he's saying things which he says in the khutbahs, and I was saying this today for us, that I came at the age of 10 to the US, age of 10, in 1981. At that time, if someone told me, probably you should go to another country to be a good Muslim, most likely we'll believe it. We'll say go to any Arabic-speaking country, or if 20 years later someone told me, not only will you live in America, you'll grow up in America, you'll finish your schooling in America, you'll marry a woman from Egypt. You are Indian, Hyderabadi, and you marry an Egyptian, and then your children will be born